hour and a quarter or so. A word of warning first of all, we will be walking on some uneven ground from time to time, so please be careful. We don't want anybody going over our ankles. I used to say we don't want any more David Beckhams. What of our American friends don't know who David Beckham is. However, welcome to Bletchly Park. I hope you're going to find something of interest in your tour. It is, as you can probably well imagine, a very complex story. And we haven't time to go into a tremendous amount of detail, so I'm going to have to cut a lot of corners. The mathematics involved are powerful, to say the least. So we're happy to know we won't be going down that avenue too far, although we have to touch on it at one point. Bletchly Park is famous for two things. First of all, for breaking the codes, obviously. And secondly, it's the place where the world's first electronic computer was developed. No matter what our American cousins, God bless them, would like to kind of claim. They might have had the first program, but they didn't have the first one. More about that later on. But to get a feel of what it must have been like here and in this country in 1940, we really have to go back to 1940. Now, for those of us who are old enough to remember those days, it's easy, isn't it? It's a walk down memory lane. But for the young people, I have to put you into a time warp. We're going back to 1940. It's 1940. We are losing the war. Our army had been defeated in Europe, evacuated from Dunkirk. Our towns and cities have been bombed. Invasion of these islands were thought to be imminent. The American embassy only gave us 3 weeks. The lifeline between Canada in those early stages, to a lesser degree the United States, was under threat by the U-boats. And a victorious German army sat just 21 miles away from Dover in Canada. That was the type of pressure that these wonderful people here at Bletchly Park were under. We've got to break these codes. We've got to find out what the enemy was about. Now let's look at the German side of the story. Why did the Germans need to have an Enigma machine in the first place? Why did they not use telephone lines like everybody else did? Well, the reason for that, or one of the reasons anyway, was the fact that they had devised a new fighting a war, a new order of battle. You can get the Blitzkrieg, a lot on in translation, the war. Everything was done. Infantry, supported by artillery, supported by tanks. They had panzer divisions. Panzer being the German word for army, but in this context it meant for the tank corps. Panzer divisions, they were light to medium fast moving tanks, supported by motorised infantry, supported by motorised light to medium guns. They didn't bother about the heavy artillery, it was too cumbersome, too slow. They relied on fleets of the infamous Stuka dive bomber to blast a path in front of the advancing panzer divisions. Like what it turned out to be. They wrapped Poland up in 28 days. Norway, Denmark, the Low Countries were followed. But if they're going to have this blitzkrieg, this lightning, it means they've got to have very, very good communications. And if they're going to have communications like that, they're going to have to use radio. And if they're going to use radio, it follows, doesn't it, that we can listen in. So they had to have these codes that were unbreakable. Now, you've got to remember there was more than one code. There was something like 30, in fact, some people say more. But we'll just, for the purpose of illustration, let's just think in terms of one of those codes, one of those patterns. Let's imagine that we have a chap sitting in the headquarters area in a rear division, and he has to send a message to his colleague in the combat area. How does he do it? We both have Enigma machines, both the sender and the receiver. And both Enigma machines are set up in exactly the same way. More about that in a minute. The operator in the rear div comes to his machine and he types in his German message through the keyboard, letter by letter. And letter by letter it is enciphered by the machine and written down. It's now garbage. It means nothing to anybody. He then sends that by Morse to the other chap. He writes it down, receiver, still garbage. It comes to his machine, and because it's set up in exactly the same way, and because it is reciprocal, he puts the garbage into a keyboard, and it comes out as plain German on the machine. And that's how to pass the message. Now, obviously, that's an oversimplification, but you can see the idea. They had an addressing system, and they knew who they were talking to. Now, let's look at the machine in a little bit more detail. It's about the size of a typewriter of the day. It was portable. Very portable. One got portable out of here a couple of years ago. And the next room incident wasn't me. It could be powered by either mains electricity or by battery. Now, when I say mains electricity, in the relative areas, headquarters areas, the Germans had their own generators, mobile generators. In a combat situation, it would be battery operated. It was divided into four sections. The keyboard section, you already spoken about. 26 letters of the alphabet. Pause to see if there's any German speakers here. The German language has 30 characters, does it not? It has our 26, plus 3 of the vowels, the A, the O, and the U, have umlauts of them. Then there's a big B, which is equivalent to 2 S's, which apparently, I'm told, was there when I was told you, but I'm told it's been phased out now. None of these things appear on the keyboard. And as the German would say, warum? Why? Well, the reason for that is the original machine, which was invented around about 1912 by an English speaker, it was used for business transactions, for railroad timetables, for banks and insurance people putting their information around, keeping it secret. Much simpler than this incident. But around about 1920, well before the Hitler came to power, the Germans spotted this in an exhibition in Zurich, Switzerland, and they said, yes, just what we're looking for. And they more or less bought the company and developed the machine. Right, so this keyboard, 26 letters of the alphabet. Then we have the light board here. 26 electric light bulbs, on the top of which is a window with the 26 letters of the alphabet. You depress one of the keys and it lights one of the letters up. Okay? Then we come to the first of the two filters. The stecker board, as the Germans would call it, or plug board. 26 holes with a number of wires with jack plugs on each end. A could be plugged up with N, B with X, and so on. And there are thousands upon thousands of ways of doing this. Then we come to the real killers, the rotors. You heard a lot about the rotors when we had the machine. Do you remember? We got the machine back, we did all the rotors, right? Do you remember? Each machine, the standard machine, and we have to remember there are more than one type of vertical machine. The standard machine had 5 rotors, but they only use 3 at any one time. Today, it might be rotor 1, 3, and 5. Tomorrow, it might be something else, because the Germans changed all these settings of their machines every night at midnight. More pressure. Isn't it? If we're going to get anything out of this, it's going to be of any operational value at all, we've got to do it quickly. Each rotor had the 26 letters of the alphabet around it, and inside there was a ring with 26 individually wired contacts. Now they could be altered as well, but I'm not sure to get into that, other than to say that each letter was individually wired. They had a starting position once they knew which rotors to use. Incidentally, all of these codes that we were talking about have code books. And the code book had the date, which 3 of the 5 rotors we're going to use, and in what order, the starting position of those rotors, and also how the plug board was going to be plugged up. So each machine was plugged up in exactly the same way each day. Through the little holes here, they have a head. For instance, the header code today might be BRG. Let's imagine that the machine is all now set up, and how does it work? And I'm using the A key here, but it could be any of the keys, and the same would apply. If you depress the A key down, it sends an impulse to A on stecker. That goes to wherever it's plugged up to. Let's say it's plugged up to M. It then goes up to the first rotor, there's M. Into the first rotor and change. To the second rotor, change again. Into the third rotor, change again. Through a reflector plate here, back through those 3 rotors, changing every time, and then the first rotor will click around one position. after 26 key depressions, the second motor would start to click then, ad infinitum. Now it could be K, let's say. It comes back to K, to second as K. K is split up with T, so T would eliminate. So A would have been enciphered as T. That time, now this is interesting. If you were to depress that key down again, it would come out with any of the remaining 25 letters of the alphabet, which it would never be A. And this applies to all the keys. This applies to all the keys. So in other words, the machine never enciphered itself. I'd like you to remember that, because when we start talking about decoding, that becomes important. Okay? Right. To give you an idea of the complexity of this machine, tonight I am going to win the lottery. Hopefully. 14 million to 1 chance of me personally winning the lottery, isn't it? To beat this machine, we're talking about 150 million to 1. I'll repeat that because I think it's worth repeating. 150 million to 1. And the Germans are 21 miles away in Calais. See the problem? As complex as this machine was, it wasn't the most complex machine the Germans were using. More about that later. I think we're going out to the first stage.
Just ask the question, how did they communicate that tumbler to each other from the headquarters?
From the code book.
Yeah.
It was in the code book. And they would set their tumblers up in exactly the same way.
Yeah,
each one. Each one, that's right. Yeah. There was another thing they used to do, which I don't particularly want to get into because it's a little bit confusing. They used to have the operator to select a letter and then type a letter through a machine, and then they would set it up that way. It's too complex. Other than to say that they were all set up in exactly the same way. Okay. Now we're going to go out and start our tour, I think, outside, and we'll talk a little bit about the history of the house. Shall we do that?
Yeah.
Dwelling. And I thought I'd been paying taxes for education. What's going wrong here? Anyway, there's been a dwelling on this site since just after the Norman Conquest. It was round by the Naffy at the back of the building. Excuse me. And as the years rolled by, so it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and the families came and the families departed. But it's in the 1800s that we find ourselves interested in the place. It was bought by Herbert Samuel Lyon. And Herbert Samuel Lyon liked to be called Sammy for some reason. And he was a Jewish financier, and he made a tremendous fortune on the North American stock market. But he said that Herbert Samuel Lyon hadn't the first idea about design. And everything you see in the front of the house, in the house, everything, all the woodwork, everything, the ceilings, everything, has been stolen from other people's houses. If you go down to it, you can't go right now, there's a lecture down there, but right down in the ballroom, there's a wonderful plaster ceiling, and that's a direct pinch from the Rockefellers who used to live down in Buckingham, down the road piece. Who was responsible for that gable up there, for instance? What a mess. It really is. But he liked it. He would say, right, we'll have someone out at Bletchly Park, and whilst they were doing this, he used to take himself and his family off to Egypt or somewhere for a month, you know, whilst the work was done. All right for some, as somebody once said. Round about the turn of the century, 1900, he became the Member of Parliament for Bletchley. And he was a liberal by persuasion, and he was very popular in the town. Even today, there are almshouses and also a school bearing the family name. Round about 1912, he became a baronet. Now, Sir Sammy didn't ring the right bells socially, so he reverted to his first name and became Sir Herbert. Sir Herbert died in 1926, and his second wife, Lady Frances, looked after the estate until her death in 1937. But there are those among the staff today who say she's never left. Now, I've not seen anything, but some of my friends say they have. What I will tell you, and this is perfectly true, last summer, on the Saturday, it was really hot, it was heaving, and we went in, I went into the place to have to get a drink, and there was two ladies in front of me, and we were down, around about where the staircase is. Now, the story is that Lady Frances was supposed to walk down the staircase with flowers in her. And these two ladies stopped. I nearly bumped into them, and one turned to the other, she said, "There's a presence here." Now, whether she'd been here before and knew the story was cutting it somewhere, I don't know, but that is perfectly true. However, 1937, she died. Round about that time, the place was put up for auction. The house and the surrounding area was lot one, but it didn't reach its reserve price of £7,500. And it was bought by a shady character, called himself Captain, we're not sure about the captain, a Captain Faulkner. And Captain Faulkner was the head of a building consortium, and he was going to knock the house down, build himself a house down by the lake, and sell everything else off for building. And he was about to do that round about the time of the Munich crisis, when onto the scene came an Admiral Sinclair from the coding school down in London. And he persuaded him, in inverted commas, to let him have the place. And up from London came some very attractive young ladies and some middle-aged men, and I'm quite sure that the good burghers of Bletchley was wondering what was happening at the big house, so they put a story around that it was Captain Ridley's hunting and shooting party. But what they were doing, they were looking at the place, and they must have looked at other places, and thinking, if there's going to be a war, should we evacuate from London to here? Because they expected London to be heavily bombed from the word go. It wasn't, but they were to know that. So, round about that time, things started to move. Faulkner didn't lose out. He got the contract for building the huts. More about the huts in a second or so. Round about that time, the first commander of Bletchly Park was a Commander Denniston, Royal Navy, and he had his office in the bay window. And he and two other people were invited to go to Poland by three very eminent Polish mathematicians. And they met in a forest just outside Warsaw. Now, what a film this would make, wouldn't it? And they were given an Enigma machine. Now, how the Poles got this Enigma machine is a very long and complicated story, which I'm unfortunately not trying to go into. But they were given this Enigma machine, together with an instruction manual, and also the blueprint of a decoding machine that they called the Bomba. Because it looked like an ice cream making machine. And I'm told by the people who speak Polish that Bomba and ice cream are the same thing. I don't know, I don't speak Polish. But they smuggled this very highly sensitive and secret information equipment through Germany. Can you imagine here? Here's Germany ready to pounce on Poland. The Geheimstatspolizei, the infamous Gestapo around every street corner, no doubt. But they got into France and into Bletchley Park, just as the war started in September 1939. At least our war started in September 1939. But when they got it here, they realised that the Germans had updated the machine a little bit and it was virtually useless. But it gave Alan Turing and Gordon Welshman and one or two other people an idea of what we were up against. Ladies and gentlemen, we owe the Poles a tremendous debt. I cannot underline that hard enough. Had it not been for that, things could have been very, very, very different. Right, so there we are. Now the huts. People working in one hut had no idea what was happening in the other hut. We are allowed to let you into the bar, a bar, and also a little cafeteria. But during the war, it is where naval intelligence was looked at. And these huts worked in tandem. Hut 4, 8, hut 6, and hut 3, and so on. And you've got to remember, there were something like 9,000 people working here in 3 watches, 3 shifts. And they were all bussed in from the surrounding area. Nobody, just one family, lived on site, and he was the quartermaster here. Everybody else was living off site. And people working in one hut had no idea what was happening in the other. Okay? I've met people when I was training, one little lady, charming lady, and I said to her, I believe you were here during the war. She said, yes. I said, and I believe you were decoding. She said, yes. He says, is there anything you can tell me about the work you did? And there was a pause. And she said, well, I signed the Official Secrets Act, never to divulge the work I did at Bletchley Park, and that was a long time. Well, I bought her a very large gin and tonic, but it didn't make it. And there was a couple, and unfortunately, The lady now is very ill, but they met here. He was a captain in the intelligence corps, and she was one of the REN officers for our American friends, WAVE officers. And they met and married in 1943, I think they said. Now, this is incredible. This was only 6 months ago. They were saying that it's only in the last 10 years that they've spoken to each other about the work they did here. That's the calibre of person you had here in those days. Thank God. You know, today, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I heard one story that there was like a husband and wife who'd gotten married after the war, and both actually worked here.
Oh, that happened again.
And then after they got married, and many years later, they kind of told each other that they'd worked here, and they didn't know the other one had worked here. And
that is another story. Yeah, there's several stories.
That was
rather like that. Yes.
That was along those lines, though, of the secrecy.
Absolutely. They were wonderful folk. There's no question about it. Now, one of the questions that's asked about Bletchly Park is why they picked Bletchly Park. Because, as I said, they must have looked at other places, and they did. Well, they picked Bletchly Park because it was about, I don't know, 60 miles north of London. It was on, and it still is, on the north-south rail link down to Euston. The A5 goes through the town, as it still does, and that was the M1 of its day. And running down that by the side of that was the General Post Office telephone and telegraph cable, so the communications were easy to tap into. And in those days, there was a rail link linking the two university cities of Cambridge and that other place, and so they can get at the brains of the outfit. Now, most of the people were from Cambridge, because in those days, Cambridge really was the centre of mathematics, and it was built on a kind of a jobs for the boys thing. Some of these academics knew somebody and said, "Oh, we've got a job for you, but I can't tell you what it is until you sign the Official Secrets Act." And they shipped him in here, and over the door, you can see the monogram of the family, Herbert Samuel Leon, and the date 1883 is when this part of the house was completed. I wish that they'd put the family motto on there, because we only fairly recently found out that the family motto was, believe it or not, we seek the truth. No else. Let's go to that.
This actually only came out in April. It coincides with the issue of 6 stamps by the Royal Mail, showing the famous ocean liners. The actual main picture there is the Queen Mary 2, which is Cunard's latest, largest cruise liner. The significance of Bletchly Park: the original Queen Mary set sail from Southampton to New York in 1936. 4 years later, it was obviously being used to transport troops across the North Atlantic. It's in no small measure to the people who worked here at Bletchly Park by tracking the Enigma codes. Obviously that convoy was made far safer. And the Queen Mary 2, I understand, is actually following the exact route of the original convoy. And finally, we have a little gift pack. It's a little bit of fun if you've got any family or friends, whether they be overseas or in the UK, haven't come across Bletchly Park. You can call it Send a Secret. I don't know if anyone saw the Enigma film at all. Yeah, one or two. There is a small scene where Claire goes through Tom's wallet as he comes across his Codebreaker's ID card, obviously giving the game away that it was a Codebreaker based here. Some young faces, I don't know if there's anyone old enough to probably recognise this. In inside the inside cover there, we've actually included what was on the Savoy menu. I very quickly hasten to say it's conveniently in French, so it's probably far more appetising than it was with the meagre resources available. And finally, if you have an interest or any youngsters in the family, wouldn't be complete without your enigma message. So if you visit the post office website, maybe allow yourself a couple of hours, depending on if you're drinking or not,
Yes.
try and hack the code. That's the end of the commercial. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks
Thanks very much indeed.
Right, do you notice as you came around the corner with the red telephone box from
Yeah.
We're hoping to have a press button A, press button B box. Now for our younger people or for our American friends, what am I talking about? In the old days we had a big black box with a telephone on the top of it. You used to put tuppence, the old pence in there, dial the number, and if they answered you press button A and the money fell. If they didn't answer, you press button B and get your money back. Well, a lot of people didn't bother. And what did we do at school boys? Yeah, it's anyway, and it's surprising what you can find with tuppence in those days. So we're hoping to have that. Now there's a sequel to that Russian book story before we go on. When did we have the foot and mouth? It was about 3 years ago, wasn't it? There was an American lady right at the back of the tour, and she was most concerned. Most concerned. She said, "What are you people eating?" I know what she was talking about. I said, "Excuse me." She said, "What are you eating in all this foot and mouth business?" Like, and one of my pals looked at him, he's a little sharper than that. He said to her, "How long are you all for?" "Oh, we're here for a phone." "Oh, you'll need a Russian book then." He said,
Yeah.
but she saw the joke. Now, behind, forgetting the window and the sign, what do you think it is? Looking at the stained glass windows, is it a chapel? Is it a pigeon loft? Well, it's neither of those. It's where the Leon family used to keep their champagne. It's a cold store. And apparently, they were big liberals by persuasion, as I said, and they were big pals of David Lloyd George, who, if you remember, was the Prime Minister during the First World War, wasn't he? And he also had an eye for the ladies, didn't he? And he used to bring some of his paramours here, drinking some of the wine from out. I was far too young to know about such things. Let's go to the next. They're very, very sensitive, but they are very nice for music. Now we're going down at the bottom here. There's a big step at the bottom. Please be careful. at school or wherever you are, if it's not programmed, it's an idiot sitting on your desk, isn't it? Knows nothing. A piece of metal or wires. Got to be told something. And this is where the clever people in the huts came in. These people were recruited for their specialist skills. They were Egyptologists. They were paleontologists. They were geologists. They were people who were very good at breaking very difficult crossword puzzles, for instance. I am in trouble with camera. But they had this type of mind, this type of inquiry of mind. There's some very famous people. Lloyd Jenkins. Lloyd Jenkins, remember him? He was one of them. Malcolm Muggeridge, remember him? He was one of them. Ian Fleming, who wrote the James Bond, he was another one. So there was a lot of these very, very clever people with this type of mind. And they were looking at the German intercept. And they could make head they could tell. They just didn't know it at first. It's just a German letters. Garbage. And when you're talking about breaking codes, you've either broken the code or you haven't broken the code. There's no sense of really breaking it. Okay? So they looked at this thing, and after a time, and I'm cutting, as I said earlier, I've got to cut some of those corners. They found that the Germans were using phrases time and time and time again. Military people do. Especially if they start talking about weather forecasts and that kind of thing. They've got to talk about pressure, they've got to talk about wind direction, they've got to talk about that type of thing. And one of the things they found, surprisingly, that the last 10 letters of most of the Luftwaffe codes, not all of them, but most of them, was always worth looking at. Because believe it or not, the last 10 letters could be, and often was, Heil Hitler. They finished their letter with Heil Hitler. Thank you very much. What a smashing crew that is. It's an in. Now they got these kind of cribs, or guesstimates. Very difficult to explain this actually. But that they looked at this stuff, and as I said, they found they using the same things time and time again. And then we used to kind of manoeuvre the enemy into doing things, and then listening to their reports. Example, just outside the French port of Brest, all the Atlantic and the North Sea was divided into squares by the river, rather like an ordinary circle now. Big squares, little squares. And outside the port of Brest was CF, and there was 150 of these small squares in there. So we'd asked the RAF to go and accurately lay mines in CF 97. Okay? And some of the RAF pilots used to go and shoot up the defences and say, what we're doing with laying mines here, hey, watch it, you know, and then they would listen then to the Morse. And somewhere they would have to report, don't go anywhere near Caesar Front 9 Sieben. And this is for the returning U-boats coming into Red and the shipping going out. They have to mention that. They had been gardening, as it was said. And somewhere in that crib, there could be that message. And they got these cribs, these guesstimates, and they slid them along the line of intercepts. And if they got to a situation where there's a letter in the intercept lined up with a letter in the crib, say it's an A, and an A in both, or an O in both, or whatever, they knew that could not be the place they should be looking. Why? Because the machine never inside the somebody's listening. They would move it along there until none of those things lined up. They would then ask the Wrens to come and plug the board up, which would be a butterless machine, using those couplings. They would give it a menu. First time menu was used in computing. You've got any computer buffs at home and say, when was the first time menu was used in computing? You know, in this very room. All right? So it gave it something to work on. They switch this thing on and it starts searching. This would spin around once and that would go around one click. Once that's been around 26 times, that would go around one click. Exactly the same as the movement of the rotors on the machine. And after a time, again, after a time, these black rotors would stop and they would read SZD or SZD for that record. What they would do then was to say, well, that could be the settings of those three rotors for that particular run on that machine. So they had then, and you'll see it shortly, a Type X machine which the Germans never broke, and they plugged it up. It would be exactly the same as the Enigma machine. And they interfaced into that a test machine, which was three, I think there's a four rotor as well, three of these, and they would set these rotors to the information they received from here. They would then put the German intercept through the Type X machine, and if it came out as plain German, they cracked it. If they hadn't, start again. And in the initial stages, it was more starting again than cracking it. But once, as I said, once they got those clips tight, once they got them tight as they did, they were cracking it in 20 minutes. The quickest they ever did it was 7.5 minutes. There were times when they didn't crack it at all. There were times when they cracked it too late, with tragic circumstances. Coventry being the best example. You probably heard it said that Churchill sacrificed Coventry to safeguard the Enigma secret. That is not what I found on my probing around. What I have found is something of this time. We knew from interrogating German aircrew, and I don't mean torture, no, I don't know we had a squadron leader, Fountain, who was very good at this. He had a knife of, he'd been air attaché in Berlin, he knew how these people thought. And he got information about these people. We knew that they were using one of their new beams. Now they had three beams, nearly 3 years before we did, which the bombers used to fire. And this new one was called Excavate. And it was a beam that they flew along, and then there was an intercepting beam from another station 20 miles before the target. Another one 10 miles before the target. Another one 5 miles before the target, which set a timing mechanism up in the bomber, which then dropped the bombs accurately. That was a long time before Obo, and a long time before we pinched that idea. We pinched that idea, okay? Now we knew they were using that, but we didn't know where. And we found out from talking to these people that it was going to be an operation called Moonlight Sonata. Now Moonlight, we knew the Germans liked to bomb by moonlight. I can remember as a boy, it's a very thing to inspire me. Now bombers room tonight, I mean, bombers room tonight. They didn't need it because they got these things, but we knew the Germans used to like to bomb by moonlight. Sonata, well, couldn't be sure. Sonata has three movements. Does it mean 3 toilets, or does it mean 1 toilet 3 ways? We didn't know. We found out from other sources that it was somewhere in the Midlands. We didn't know exactly where. And that night, that particular night, they hadn't broken the code until something like 6:30 to 7 o'clock in the evening. By the time we broke it and sifted through it, the radar started. We couldn't jam that new beam because we didn't know what frequency it was on. Okay? Now you must remember, in those days, it was the only defence we got to jam the beams. Night fighters were ineffective until they got airborne radar, which is another 2 years away. Anti-aircraft guns made a lot of noise, as I remember, but they were very inaccurate again until they got radar, another 2 years away. The only defence we had was to block the beams, and we were jamming on the wrong frequency. What happened? 2,000 people came, twice as many injured, Coventry wiped off the map. Okay? 1 German bomber crashed on landing in France. No defence at all. All because we got it wrong. Just shows you how important it's working. If we hadn't have had these, we could have had a Coventry every night, could we not? Very important. Now, at the same time, they started picking up other radio signals which were not Morse. They were international teleprinter codes. Everybody had been using that, you can see it about it. We'd use it to link in the British Empire together for what, nearly 200 years, well, certainly 100 years. So there's certainly not secret. But the Germans had masked these signals by using a very, very high-powered type of mathematics, and I'm not going to go into it. It's called module to mathematics. And if I was to say to you that in module to mathematics, the 4 rules of arithmetic do not apply, you'd think I'd blown my stack. But this is fact. And they were using that to mask their codes. And it started one of the most amazing stories of the Second World War in this very room. By 2 men, one called Max Newman, and a man called Tuck, who just recently died, sat down with a piece of paper and two pencils. And they worked out the logic of a machine that they weren't to see until after the war was over. Took them 3.5 months of day after day, mental gymnastics, but they did it. And this was BC, remember, before computers. All they've got was slide rules and some calculating machines that took forever to do division. Anyway, they worked it out. And not only did they work out that this machine had got not 3 rotors, but 4, but 12. And it wasn't A, B, C, D, E, F, G going on. It was a CAM arrangement of zeros and ones. It was a binary mathematical game. The Germans were using this, and they found out we broke the code here, but it took us 3 weeks to do one intercept. It's useless. Things are going to be speeded up. And onto the picture came a very young post officer engineer called Tommy Flowers. And he said, yes, he thought he could do it. How are you going to do it, Tommy? He said, I'm going to use electronics. And all the experts went, I don't think so. 1940 electronics. Radio, yes, but it depended on the ionosphere. Radar, yes, but it was unstable. Television, yes, we'd flirted with it, but it was very short range, and again, it was unstable. He said, okay. So he built a machine with 1,500 valves, tubes for our American friends, and go on. And all the experts said, they are. So he went away, back to Dollars Hill, and he spent £1,000 of his own money. £1,000 in 1940 was a lot of money. What a money that's making, it's a lot of money. Okay. And he built a machine with 2,500 valves and a paper tape reader. French tape. Old hat now, I know, it wasn't there. Okay? And this tape reader was going through a pulley system, which you'll see shortly. And it was being read by 7 photoelectric cells. We're talking 1940 here. At 5,000 characters a second. And it worked out the position of those 12 rotors in 2 hours. The world's first computer, no matter what I make, because it was costless. They had no idea what they did make it, because it was just for one job. And somebody came up with a bright idea. I know, if I put that button there and take that power out and put that there, it does something else. It wasn't programmable. Now, the American machine was. Ours wasn't, but ours was the first electronic computer. There were 10 of these machines on our station in Bletchly Park. And one of the things we found out from it, many, was the Germans had bought the dissect, and that the invasion at Normandy was a feint. We told them that through other circles, other ways. And we conned them into thinking that the true invasion was going to come down the Calais, okay, and in through the top of Germany, West and Denmark. We had 2 fictitious armies in England. One commanded by a very, very famous American general called Patton. Very loud mouth guy. Just to follow his order. Keep talking, George. You know. Keep talking, George, you're doing well. You know. And he commanded, he didn't like it at all, because he was a very good general. He wanted to get in with his men and get on with it, which he did later on. But the thing is, he was in command of this fictitious army. There were 2. One was called, 2 excellent. One was called 42 North, and the other one was called 42 South. And the North one is round Scotland, and that was trying to get the Germans to think we were coming across the North Sea. Those radio communications playing over the whole fictitious. But it worked. Now, the thing is, from breaking into that machine that Hitler headquarters used and just to his high command, we knew they had bought that deception. The first time, probably not the last time, but the first time, I feel, that one high command knew exactly what the other high command was thinking. And it must have saved thousands and thousands and thousands of lives. Because after the invasion, what was it, 12, 11 months later, the war was over. Yes, a lot of people have what they're dying to do stuff. But I think that it certainly did save a tremendous amount of lives. Okay, so there we are. Now, I'm going to let you go now, and one of my colleagues is going to take you up to the exhibition, and you can have a look at the machines that I've been raving on about. I hope you've enjoyed your tour with me, and if you come again sometime, you get a different guide and you get a different You know? So there we go. So shall we go and have a look at the fishing there?
By the way, let me mention this here on the tape because I forgot to say it before. The tour earlier was not complete because I forgot to bring any spare tapes. So I only had 1 hour of filming at Bletchly Park. So I deliberately left out things on the tour. So, so I deliberately left out portions of his tour as he was showing outside buildings and stuff like that to seem like they might be boring, although they really weren't. Just to have enough tape left to film the inside things like this. Go!
I'm Grant Ellis. I'm one of Richard's new friends here in Bletchly Park, England. And this is an analog computer, and this is also an analog computer. I'm an analog kind of guy, and I live in an analog kind of world. And in this analog world, I use an analog computer. That's all I have to say.
I apologize, ladies and gentlemen, for that kook getting in my frame.
This is the Colossus machine.